All right. So welcome. As you all can see, this will be the presentation for the April 2nd, 2024 regular election. It's a candidate information session. So what I'm going to be providing you tonight is basically information that should make you as a candidate, potential candidate, successful. As far as completing your nomination forms, all of your Fair Campaign Practices Act information, and then establishing an initial relationship with town staff and the town clerk for how you as a candidate will proceed through this process. All right, without any further ado, this is a list of general information. Frankly, there is quite a lot of information that goes into regulating how an election functions. This information is sort of a good first start option for folks that are interested in learning more. I would specifically highlight that elections in the town of Wellington are governed by the Municipal Code, Chapter 2, Article 1, which you can find on the town's website, as well as the Colorado Revised Statutes, specifically Article 45 of Title 1 and Articles 10 and 11 of Title 31. I would strongly recommend any potential candidates familiarize themselves with those laws because they do govern how the process and function works here in the town of Wellington. A couple of additional relevant resources are the Colorado Secretary of State's Campaign and Political Finance Manual. Frankly, Article 45 of Title 1 is very comprehensive when it comes to the requirements for reporting on fair campaign practices. And indeed, there have been updates to that article in the last with the last legislative section. So what I'll present to you tonight will be sort of the updated requirements for that, but you are strongly encouraged to familiarize yourself with Article 45 of Title 1. Finally, the town of Wellington follows a council manager form of government. So I would strongly recommend any candidate to, in order to understand the fundamentals of what a council manager form of government does, to read through the ICMA council manager government brochure. And then again, this information will pertain specifically to the April 2nd, 2024 regular election for the town of Wellington, which is specifically going to be a mail ballot election, as the Board of Trustees have decided previously. Okay, moving right along, the town's Board of Trustees serve for terms of 4 years. The term will begin either on Tuesday, April the 16th at 6:30 p.m. or Tuesday, April the 23rd at 6:30 p.m., depending on whether or not a recount will be required for the election. There are numerous, there are several criteria in which case that could happen. The bottom line though is if no recount is required at the conclusion of the election, the new trustees will be integrated into the board on April 16th at 6:30 p.m. And then as I sort of alluded to here, the regular meetings for the trustees are the second and fourth Tuesdays of every month. And then work sessions are held typically on the third Tuesday. Okay. Discussing candidacy. So as I sort of mentioned previously, there are 3 trustee seats that will be available per the April 2nd election. And the qualifications for office, it's important to cover very briefly. A person must be a Wellington resident and a registered elector, which can include any annexed territory for at least 12 months immediately preceding the date of the election. Per Title 31, they also must be a qualified elector, meaning that they're a citizen of the United States and at least 18 years old. And then finally, to note for candidacy information and purposes, an individual can't be a candidate for 2 municipal offices at the same time, nor can they hold 2 elected positions at the same time. Okay, as far as declaring candidacy goes, an elector becomes a candidate when they publicly announce their intention to hold public office, or when they make or receive a contribution or expenditure in support of their campaign. Finally, every candidate that falls into these 2 criteria is required to provide a candidate affidavit to me, the town clerk's office, within 10 days of making those initial steps. We can talk more about what that candidate affidavit looks like, and you can find it specifically in the candidate information packet. And then a key thing to note here is that there's a difference between a standalone candidate and a candidate committee. The Title CRS Title 145, 110 requires that candidate committees must be formed before accepting contributions or making expenditures. That is key information. Okay, the next information that we'll cover is how to get on the ballot. So I've decided that I want to be a candidate. How do I get on the ballot? Give me 1 second here. There we go. Okay, so candidates interested in being on the ballot have two options. The first is by nomination, and the process for this is through the use of a petition that is circulated, developed by my office and circulated through the town by a circulator. That circulator can be the same person that is the candidate, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. Circulation of this petition can begin on January the 2nd at the beginning of business that day. And the petitions require at least 10 registered elector signatures from town in order to be considered valid. I've underlined at least here because it's permissible to have more, and in many cases, it may be wise to pursue additional signatures. Because if, for example, one of them is determined to be insufficient, then that invalidates the nomination of the petition. And as CRS requires, at least 10 registered electors must sign the petition and be determined to be sufficient in order for the candidate to get on the ballot. A candidate affidavit and acceptance of nomination affidavit are both required, and those will both be items that are included in the nomination petition packet. And then those packets will be due by 5 p.m. on January the 22nd at 2024 to my office. The forms do require notarization, and it's key to note that my office cannot notarize those election documents for you because that would potentially constitute a conflict of interest. And what I will say is, as far as beginning circulation, those forms will be available for pickup at the Municipal Services Building on January the 22nd at beginning of business. So interested candidates can simply go to the Municipal Services Building, request a nomination petition packet, and then begin circulating. Okay, the second option for a candidate for getting on the ballot is to file a write-in affidavit. And what that technically does is, instead of having a person's name listed specifically on the ballot, there'll be a section for write-in candidates. And if that person's name appears as a written vote on the ballot, then that vote will be counted. If, for example, I haven't received a write-in candidate affidavit from a one Mickey Mouse, and someone writes Mickey Mouse on the ballot, Mickey Mouse will not be counted toward the election. However, if I have received the write-in affidavit from that candidate, Mickey Mouse, and someone writes Mickey Mouse, then Mickey Mouse is counted toward the result of the election. Okay. So this affidavit, again, has to be filed with my office by 5 p.m. on January the 22nd. Okay. There's no circulation required in this option, but it does have the same deadline. Okay. Let's discuss some information about nomination petitions. One moment, I'm sorry. Okay. As far as nomination petitions and eligibility for signatures, a registered elector can sign the same number of nomination petitions as there are positions to be elected. So, for example, in the April 2, 2024 election, that means that an elector can sign 3 nomination petitions. Petition circulators are required to personally observe every signature that they solicit. All pages of the petition packet needs to be one instrument, meaning that separation of those pages will invalidate the packet. Each of the signers must complete all information as it's clearly specified on the form. Signers' information is then compared to the active list of registered electors for Wellington, which is maintained by Larimer County. And then at least 10 registered elector signatures are required, but as I mentioned previously, it may behoove you to solicit additional signatures. And then the final information to note here is that petitions will be maintained in the town clerk's office and are part of the public record. Okay, next we'll discuss sufficiency and withdrawals for nomination packets. After receipt of the packet by my office, it is then my duty to determine them as sufficient or insufficient. And what that means is that I'm checking that the petition and signers have complied with the applicable regulations. Sufficient petitions will then result in me notifying the candidate, And if there are no objections, the candidate is then added to the ballot. Insufficient petitions will be returned to the candidates. I'll notify them of the insufficiency, and the deficiencies with those petitions can be cured or amended by new nomination petition, or excuse me, they can be cured by amendment or new nomination petition at any time prior to 5 p.m. on January the 29th. Okay, and then the final piece to note for this slide is that nominated candidates do have the option to withdraw at any time prior to January 29th. That simply requires an affidavit. Okay, information on campaign signs. There is no permit required to post campaign signs. However, there's a few key pieces of information to note. They shouldn't be placed in the public right-of-way. They're not allowed on any public property. They may only be placed on private property with the permission of the property owner. Full signs should not be positioned in a way that causes unsafe blind spots. Campaign signs can't be placed within 100 feet of a ballot drop box, and then they can't have any moving or flashing parts. In the candidate information packet, there is additional information on the size and other constraints applicable to this requirement. Okay, that concludes the portion about nominations. Next, we'll move into discussion of the Fair Campaign Practices Act, the financial reporting requirements, and such. Okay, so I'd also like to note at the beginning of this portion that, again, Title I, Article 45 is the governing law for this segment of my presentation, and it is very substantial. Again, there were amendments to that section of Colorado law with the last legislative session in Colorado. So the information that I'm presenting on this topic specifically reflects the updated dates and requirements, but it is very useful to read and understand Article 1 of Title 45 for any potential candidates. So the basic process is that a candidate, once nominated and on the ballot, is required to submit additional documents that discuss the disclosure of contributions and expenditures to their campaign. Those filings are done via forms, and they're made specifically to my office and become part of the public record. Again, candidate committees must register with the clerk's office before accepting contributions. And then I would note here that candidates, their committees, and registered agents, are responsible for the accuracy and timeliness of all filings under this Fair Campaign Practices Act. Okay, I think I've covered all those. Here's some resources that are relevant. Again, Article 45, Title I. Sort of already covered most of this information, but again, the requirements are substantial. This list of references should provide you with a comprehensive set of documents that indicate the requirements for this portion. The final thing I would note for this first portion is that while the town clerk's office can't provide you with legal advice, we are certainly happy to answer questions related to what the process requires and entails. Once we start getting into the questions of should I write X or X on this form, that's where I'm no longer able to assist you, and would at that point encourage you to seek legal counsel of your own. Okay, this is a list of the campaign finance reporting deadlines. The first to note is that after a candidate declares their candidacy, within 10 days of that point, they're required to submit a candidate affidavit regarding FCPA to the clerk's office. And then there are additional contribution reports that are required 60, 30, 15 days prior to the election, and then 30 days and 1 year recurring each year after the election. And then there may be additional requirements to file reports depending on campaign activities. And again, that's covered largely under Title I, Article 45. Okay, there's no limit to the dollar amount you can accept as a contribution for a candidacy, but you must report all campaign contributions. And this is a basic list of what the requirements for the different levels of contributions require. You can see that under 1999, contributions don't need to be itemized. After or above $20 or more, they must be itemized. For $100 or more, they must include the occupation and employer of the contributor, and so on. Yes, and this is specifically one of the most significant portions of Title I Article 45 that's changed. It's largely increased the requirements for filing contribution reports. Okay, certain contributions that candidates and committees can't accept. It's the responsibility of the candidate and their committee to ensure that they are complying with the applicable campaign finance laws, including but not limited to Article 8, of the Colorado Constitution and Title 145 of CRS. I think I've already beat the legal horse to death there, so we'll move on. Expenditures. An expenditure occurs when it's made, when funds are obligated, or when a contract is established, whichever one of those is first. Expenditures must be itemized and include the name and address of the payee and the purpose of the expense. And then it's also important to note that candidates cannot transfer money from their own campaign to a different campaign under the Fair Campaign Practices Act. Okay. These are important dates specific to the election. It incorporates the nomination process, the lot drawing for ballot order, which will be conducted on February the 1st at 5 p.m. here in the Leeper Center. That's where we'll determine the order that the candidates will be listed on the ballot. The next key date for candidates to highlight would be February the 29th. And at that point, we'll have a candidate orientation, which will provide a more comprehensive overview of what operations and services the town has to offer, as well as the duties and responsibilities of what a trustee does for the town of Wellington. And then sprinkled throughout there, you can see the campaign finance report requirements due. UOCAVA ballots are mailed. UOCAVA can't remember the full acronym off the top of my head, but it's Uniform Overseas something. Basically involves mailing ballots to folks that serve the federal government or other similar categories overseas. Those ballots get mailed out early and then are counted similarly to the way that mail ballots are counted for the rest. The remainder of ballots then are mailed on March the 11th, and those will go out to all of the electors, all of the active registered electors of the town. Outside of the campaign finance report due dates, again, April the 2nd is election day, and then the canvass will occur thereafter and be one of those two dates that the results of the election will be finalized on one of those two dates that I had mentioned previously at the beginning of the presentation. Okay. So we've made it to the end of my portion of the initial presentation. At this point, I'm happy to answer any questions. One thing that I would note is that the candidate information packet is 52 pages, and I have a copy of it here if you would like to see it. I'm certainly very happy to answer any questions that you may have about the election process. I want to be available and capable of filling my responsibilities to the town, and town staff certainly are very excited about this election opportunity. So yeah, we'll go ahead and proceed to any questions that folks here present in the room may have, or if anybody is online that would like to ask a question, they're welcome to do that as well. Fairly quickly. It's at this point my intent to publish relevant candidate information to include their nomination petitions, their affidavits, and their filing submissions to my office that are deemed to be sufficient as soon as possible or feasible after I've received them. Any other questions? Nope. Going once. Going twice. Okay, well, thank you all so much. If you're obviously welcome to take a copy of those QR code pages. The information that I presented, you can find it on the town's website. I would strongly recommend looking at the candidate information packet. It provides detailed information on all of the different stages of the election. Some of that information we'll cover at the candidate orientation, but for those that are interested in sort of doing a read ahead, this would be the best place for you to start. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to the town staff office. You can reach us either via the website or emails or phone. So thank you all very much, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.